Welcome back to Grimverse History, where we uncover the strange and forgotten sides of history. Tonight, we step into the final fever-struck hours of Oliver Cromwell, a man who ruled England with iron conviction, yet died defeated by something as small as a mosquito. They called him the most powerful man in England, a general who toppled a king, a leader who bent a nation to his will. But power offers no protection when death chooses something unexpected. Imagine this: the conqueror of armies undone not by steel, not by betrayal, but by an insect. A single bite buried under 9 years of victories and paranoia. History paints Cromwell as a titan, yet in his final days, he shook, sweated, and prayed like any frightened mortal. The cure existed. It sat on the table. His physicians begged him, and still, he refused it. Why would a man who feared no king be terrified of a medicine? And why did the sky over London erupt into a violent storm the moment he died? You walk a few quiet steps down the corridor. Cold stone, a thin draft. Everything feels as if it's holding its breath. A heavy wooden door waits ahead. Your hand touches the cool brass handle. For a moment, the air behind it trembles. Warm, humid, uneasy. Then the hinge loosens. The door opens just enough for you to slip through, and the dim chamber exhales its heat and candle-thick air, pulling you inside before you can speak. Take a slow breath. Let the noise of your day melt away. You're here now. You're safe. And if these quiet journeys through history bring you comfort, feel free to tap like and subscribe so you never miss another night in the Grimverse. Only curiosity follows you in this room. Now, dim the lights. Let the hum of your fan become the heartbeat of the palace walls. Let your thoughts soften, sink into the quiet. It's the summer of 1658. Storm clouds gather over London. Inside a darkened chamber, the Lord Protector burns from within, while the cure that could save him sits untouched, inches from his hand, where the first shadow touches him. The story always begins in a place no one expects, not in a throne room, not on a battlefield, but in a damp corner of Ireland, where the air hangs thick with peat smoke, cold mist, and the sort of silence that makes men feel watched. It is 1649, and Oliver Cromwell arrives with an army behind him and destiny in his pockets. He also arrives with bare skin, and Ireland, at that time, is full of tiny creatures who do not respect rank. He doesn't feel the bite when it lands. No one ever does. A mosquito drifts through the humid air, settles on the wrist of the most dangerous man in England, and inserts a future he cannot escape. A pinprick, a flick of wings, and something ancient enters his bloodstream. Something patient, cyclical, and stubborn. Malaria doesn't rush. It waits. Cromwell continues marching. Villages burn. Soldiers pray. The Irish countryside rolls by in green waves, soft and deceiving. But the parasite grows, dividing quietly in the dark. It is a slow guest, but a persistent one. And like all unwelcome guests, it takes more than it gives. When the first fever comes, Cromwell brushes it off. He assumes it's the weather, or exhaustion, or God testing his resolve. Cromwell interprets many things as God testing his resolve, but malaria has no interest in theology. It follows its own clock. The chills arrive first, sharp, sudden, almost polite. Then the heat surges upward, turning his bones into iron rods and his breath into smoke. His hands tremble, his vision blurs. Sweat gathers beneath layers of wool and armor. He prays harder. The fever does not care. The cycle ends. He recovers. And for a moment, the world steadies again. But malaria always circles back. It has the patience of a monk copying a manuscript. Every few weeks, it knocks on the door of his body, and Cromwell answers it with clenched teeth and a damp shirt. Some nights, he shakes so hard, the bed beneath him creaks. Other nights, he burns so fiercely that the air above his skin ripples like heat over a blacksmith's forge. His doctors call it tertian fever. Cromwell calls it my old enemy. The mosquito would probably find that flattering. Years pass. Battles end. Nations shift. But the parasite remains. It is a quiet companion, living in his blood like a forgotten promise. And every time it returns, it leaves him a little weaker, a little slower, a little more aware that even the strongest bodies betray their owners eventually. By the late 1650s, he no longer hides his symptoms well. His hand shakes when he signs orders. His attendants notice the tremors. His physicians notice the sweats. And the court whispers behind tapestries. Soft, careful, frightened whispers. A ruler's weakness is a dangerous scent. People smell opportunity in it. Malaria doesn't kill quickly. It kills by accumulation. Fever after fever, month after month, year after year. It chips away at certainty. It steals sleep. It muddles judgment. It nudges paranoia into the corners of a man's mind. And Cromwell, already suspicious of shadows, begins to see more of them. In those days, medicine is a mixture of prayer, guesswork, and whatever herb didn't kill the last patient. Cromwell tries all three. They help as much as rain helps a drowning man. Still, he convinces himself he is winning the war inside his veins. He is, after all, the Lord Protector of England. He has defeated kings, armies, conspiracies. Surely he can defeat a fever. The fever disagrees. One evening, he collapses against a wall, breathless, clammy, shaking hard enough that the candlelight stutters. His physicians gather around him with bowls of herbs and desperate optimism. They whisper to each other. They pray under their breath. Nothing changes. Malaria watches from the bloodstream and waits for its next move. It always waits. The 9-year battle stretches forward, quiet, invisible, relentless. A war fought entirely inside one man. No cheers, no banners, no victories. Just sweat, tremors, and a ruler learning that some enemies cannot be conquered, only endured. By now, the parasite has become part of him, woven into his story like a dark thread. It will not leave. It will not fade. It will simply return, again and again, until something else knocks the door open for good. Mosquitoes rarely get credit for shaping history, but this one deserves a footnote. A small one, but a sharp one. The air shifts again, cooler now, as another truth edges forward. The grief that softens the iron. Grief moves the way mist does. Quiet, unhurried. Already there before anyone realizes it's arrived. In the summer of 1658, London presses its heat against every window pane, and inside Whitehall, a softer tragedy begins to unfold. Elizabeth Claypole fades the way a candle does when the wick grows tired. No sudden drama, just a slow dimming. A room heavy with lavender, warm sheets, and the steady shuffle of servants, trying not to disturb what little strength remains on the bed. Most days, someone sits beside her with a bowl of broth or a whispered prayer. The physicians come and go like uncertain ghosts. They mix tinctures, argue in corners, and offer reassurances that look suspiciously like guesses. No one in that chamber truly believes she is improving. People cling to hope anyway. Humans are stubborn that way. Cromwell visits often, though not always for long. When he enters, the atmosphere changes. It tightens, then softens, as if the room remembers it once knew laughter and doesn't quite know how to welcome it back. Sometimes he stands near the window, pretending to study clouds that refuse to move. Other times he lowers himself to her side, fingers wrapped gently around a hand that grows weightless between breaths. Elizabeth had been the warmest corner in his life, the one person who could coax a quieter smile from a man carved mostly from discipline and scripture. There's a kind of love that disarms without trying. Hers was that sort. Even the sternest men have a room somewhere in their chest they never show anyone. She lived there. Illness respects none of that. It advances steadily, patiently stripping away color and sound until only whispers remain. The servants learn to walk on softened feet. Her mother sits nearby with the posture of someone balancing between prayer and resignation. Hours stretch. Nights blur. The air turns thick enough to feel. One morning, the rhythm in the room changes. A shallow breath pauses. Another doesn't follow. No cries erupt. No dramatic collapse. Just a small silence that widens slowly, like ink spreading through water. Someone lowers their head. Another step backs away from the bed. The world rearranges itself without asking permission. Cromwell doesn't speak, not immediately. He just watches the stillness settle around his daughter's face. A stillness too clean, too final. His shoulders dip, barely noticeable, but the room feels it. Grief has many shapes. This one is terribly quiet. Evening finds him wandering the palace corridors. The candles flicker without wind. Garden paths stretch empty under the August dusk. London hums somewhere beyond the gates, cheerfully unaware that one man's world has cracked in a place no mortar can reach. Cromwell has known death. He has ordered it, justified it, wrapped it in scripture when needed. But the ledger of a father is different from the ledger of a ruler. Kings may fall under his command, but children are not supposed to. This kind of loss has no logic to fight against, no argument to win. Sleep becomes thin, nights grow long. He kneels more often, less out of duty than out of desperation. The prayers sound different now, less certain, less sharp, more like someone calling into fog and hoping for an echo. Sometimes the only reply is the faint trembling of his hands. Court members notice the change, but do not comment. They speak in lowered tones, as if naming sorrow might invite it into their own homes. Servants move around him carefully, the way people move around someone carrying too much weight. Even the palace dogs linger at his feet a little longer. Animals sense sinking spirits long before physicians do. Meanwhile, the old fever stirs beneath his ribs. Grief softens the walls of the body, and illness is always listening for weakness. A tremor returns, then another. Sweat slicks his collar, and somewhere deep inside the bloodstream, the parasite that arrived years ago stretches, as if waking from a nap. Malaria waits for this moment. Fever thrives in sorrow's shadow, and the Lord Protector, once unshakable, begins to sway under a burden with no enemy to strike at. A man can survive the weight of nations on his shoulders, but the weight of one lost child unbalances even the strongest foundations. Day by day, certainty leaks out of him like warmth from a cooling hearth. Nothing dramatic, nothing theatrical, just a slow undoing woven into ordinary hours. A faltering signature, a half-finished sentence, a prayer cut short. Grief rarely kills. It simply removes the armor, leaving the door open for something else to walk in. And something else is already climbing the steps toward his chamber. When conviction costs more than cure. Storms rarely begin with lightning. Most of them start with a temperature rising somewhere no one notices. And inside Cromwell, the heat begins climbing again in late July. Quiet at first, almost shy, the way trouble likes to introduce itself. The first tremor ripples up his arm during a council meeting. Someone mistakes it for impatience, someone else for anger. But the tremor returns that night, sharper, more focused, almost proud of itself. The physicians exchange looks. Servants whisper as they wring out damp sheets. In the corner of the chamber, the air thickens like warm syrup. Then the fever arrives properly. It comes in waves. Long, rolling, merciless waves, the kind that drown without ever touching water. The room grows too small for his breath. Sweat darkens the linen beneath him. The mattress creaks under the force of his shivering. Candles tremble. Bowls of cooling herbs fill the air with a bitter sweetness that never seems to help. Malaria works with a strange rhythm, a rhythm the body remembers even when the mind tries to forget. Chills bite hard, as if winter has crawled into the marrow. Heat follows, scorching everything it touches, and after the fire dies down, exhaustion folds a man inward like wet cloth. Cromwell's doctors, educated, anxious, and occasionally competent, begin whispering about Jesuits' bark. They know the stories. They've heard of men pulled back from the brink by a powder made from Peruvian cinchona, a simple remedy, bitter to swallow, but powerful. They bring it up carefully, respectfully, almost apologetically. Jesuits' powder, a medicine tied to Catholic hands, Catholic lands, Catholic priests. The physicians try again the next morning. Their voices grow softer as the fever grows louder. Jesuits' powder sits nearby, a tiny vial of hope resting quietly on a table that no one dares to push closer. Medicine does not ask about politics. Fever does not negotiate terms, but men do. And Cromwell's convictions, forged through decades of conflict, refused to bend for a cure made by the hands he fought. The fever punishes the choice. By mid-August, his skin burns so hot, the servants change his linens 3 times a night. He mutters names no one recognizes. He calls for his daughter without realizing it. He prays in a whispering loop, the words dissolving before they leave his mouth. Sometimes he tries to sit up. Sometimes his body doesn't remember how. Doctors gather around the bed like mourners at a funeral that hasn't happened yet. One suggests bleeding him. Another opposes it. A third suggests a prayer service. None of them suggest the powder anymore. Not out of agreement, but out of fear. Fever can humble a king. Fever can empty a general. But fever combined with grief, that mixture has its own gravity. Days blur. Nights stretch thin. Rain taps against the palace windows as if asking to be let in. The storm outside grows as the storm inside him peaks. On September 2nd, the fever reaches its crescendo. It tears through his body with the confidence of something that knows no one will stop it. Doctors stand helpless. Servants kneel. The room fills with the faint rattle of breath slipping between worlds. Somewhere across the chamber, Jesuit's bark remains in its vial, untouched, unwanted, close enough to see, far enough to save no one. It's remarkable how many endings in history come down to a single, stubborn belief. This one certainly does. At dawn, the fever finally takes what it came for. A last ragged breath, a pause. A hush moving through the corridor like a soft wind. Outside, the sky cracks open with thunder. The cure stays where it is. A strange quiet settles over Whitehall, the sort of quiet that invites the next tragedy to walk in, the body that refuses to stay still. Death has an odd sense of drama. It chooses its moments, its lighting, even its audience. But what follows death, the part no one wants to talk about, rarely cooperates with dignity. Whitehall grows strangely busy in the hours after Cromwell's last breath. Footsteps multiply, whispers thicken. The entire palace tiptoes around the fact that England's most powerful man is now inconveniently mortal. A small team of physicians gathers in the chamber, Their faces carry that particular expression unique to early modern medicine. Equal parts confidence, confusion, and the hope no one asks too many questions. They prepare him for embalming, a word that sounds cleaner than the work it hides. The body lies cooling, but not as quickly as they expect. Heat lingers under the skin, trapped like a fading storm. When they first open him, the air shifts. Not with horror, physicians see worse each week, but with surprise. Inside the abdomen, the organs tell the story the man never could. The spleen, especially, looks wrong. Not swollen in the usual way, not bruised, something else. A thick, dark residue, the sort that settles at the bottom of an oil jar, spreads across its surface. One physician mutters that it resembles leaves of oil. Another nods, pretending to understand. Medical terminology in the 17th century is mostly metaphor anyway. Then comes the real trouble. Bodies with fever do not embalm well. Heat lingers. Fluid builds. Gases gather. What begins as a straightforward procedure slowly shifts towards something much less polite. The physicians try cooling powders. They try scented cloths. They try prayer, because at this point, why not? But the body resists them at every turn, swelling beneath the bandages, pushing back against the linen wrappings, changing shape the way rising dough does when left too close to a fire. Word spreads through the palace corridors. The Lord Protector refuses to stay still. Servants exchange glances. Officials begin planning a funeral procession filled with ritual, banners, and pageantry. No one mentions the scent beginning to slip under the doors of the chamber. History books never talk about smell, but decay always speaks first. Within 2 days, the situation becomes delicate. A body that cannot be displayed, cannot be mourned in public. Not properly, not ceremonially. And England needs ceremony right now. Needs to pretend stability still exists. So a decision is made. Not proudly, but firmly. They commission a wax effigy. A beautiful one. Painted cheeks, silk garments. A likeness arranged in perfect repose. Eyes calm, hands folded. Everything a real corpse refuses to be. The effigy is placed in the coffin. The coffin is placed in the great hall. Crowds pass by, murmuring admiration for the peaceful look of their departed leader. Peaceful is easier than truthful. People prefer their heroes neat. Meanwhile, the real body is buried. Quietly. Not dishonorably, but with speed. The earth accepts what the palace could not display. For weeks afterward, England grieves the wax figure. The real Cromwell rests alone beneath damp soil, the air above him still carrying a faint echo of storm. But history is rarely satisfied with a simple ending. 2 years pass. A different king sits on the throne. A king who remembers exactly who executed his father. The restoration brings joy to some, justice to others, and something colder to Cromwell. Orders arrive. Graves open. Coffins lift. The body of the Lord Protector rises again. Not for honor, but for punishment. The corpse is hanged at Tyburn, a final humiliation performed on a man who once commanded armies. The crowd watches. Some cheer, some look away. Justice, when mixed with revenge, always tastes complicated. After the hanging, his head is severed, placed on a spike, displayed above Westminster Hall. Wind, rain, and time become his last companions. For more than 20 years, the head remains there, a silent witness to the shifting moods of England. Bodies seldom choose their fates. Cromwell's certainly didn't. And yet, the most unsettling part of this story isn't what happened after death, but what his death made possible next. The death that redirects a kingdom. History changes direction quietly, not with a coronation, not with a trumpet, often with something small. A breath stopping, a candle flickering out, or, in this case, a fevered man refusing a bitter powder. England wakes to Cromwell's death the way a city wakes to fog, slowly, uncertainly, and with the sense that familiar landmarks now look different. He had been the spine of the Commonwealth, rigid, complicated, sometimes painful, but a spine nonetheless. Once he's gone, the air in London carries a new temperature, unspoken, uneasy, almost expectant. Richard Cromwell, the son selected to inherit his father's mantle, steps forward. Quiet man, gentle man, fond of order, but not particularly fond of ruling. A leader shaped more by courtesy than conviction. The kind of man who probably apologizes to furniture when he bumps into it. England studies him with polite curiosity, then with mild concern, then with something closer to disappointment. A country built on iron does not transition easily to linen. Meanwhile, the council watches him, the army measures him, and Parliament tests the edges of his patience the way children test the strength of a wooden table. Nothing breaks immediately, but the wood creaks. The Commonwealth had always depended on a single gravitational centre. When that centre disappears, everything else starts to drift. Arguments multiply, allegiances shift, old loyalties feel their chains loosen. In taverns, whispers begin. At markets, rumours travel faster than the fish smell. Some long for the monarchy back, some long for Cromwell back, some just long for taxes to stop rising. Everyone wants something different. No one agrees on what it should be. Richard tries with dignity, tries with patience. But patience is a trait England rarely rewards. And so the government begins to fold inward, like parchment left too close to a candle. The army moves next. Armies always do. They measure stability the way a hawk measures distance, silently, precisely, without emotion. And they decide the Commonwealth no longer offers a horizon worth protecting. Within months, Richard resigns. A gentle collapse, no rebellion, no bloodbath. Just a man quietly acknowledging that the chair he sits in belongs to someone else now. England exhales, not in relief, more like resignation. The kind of breath taken before walking back into a house you swore you'd never return to. By 1660, the motion becomes inevitable. A tide turning, a wheel clicking into place. Charles II is invited back. The same dynasty Cromwell had broken with cannons, sermons, and iron will. And Cromwell's death sits quietly at the center of this pivot point. If the fever had spared him, if grief had not hollowed him, if malaria had not waited so patiently, perhaps the Commonwealth might have endured. Not forever, but longer. He might have steadied Parliament, might have shaped Richard into something firmer, might have prevented England from snapping back into royal hands so abruptly. History doesn't deal in might, but sometimes it leaves enough crumbs to imagine the path not taken. Political pamphlets reappear. Royal insignias resurface. Cromwell's laws are sifted through, amended, discarded, and his name becomes something sharp, spoken differently depending on who says it. A tyrant to some, a liberator to others, a lesson to most. Meanwhile, the fate of his severed head wanders along its own strange timeline, passing through collectors, curiosity seekers, and scholars who argue over its authenticity, as if the skull might chime in and settle the debate. 3 centuries of drifting, almost symbolic. A leader who shaped a nation from the inside, reduced to an object passed from hand to hand. History rarely grants peace to the people who bend it. Cromwell is no exception. Yet the real weight of his final days is not the fever, the embalming, or the spike above Westminster. The real weight is this simple truth. England changed course because one man died too soon. Not in battle, not by blade, but because of a mosquito, a doctrine, and a vial of medicine he would not touch. The smallest choices sometimes tilt the largest empires. And this one tilts quietly, almost politely, as if history itself hesitated before pushing. The candle lowers, the room dims, and the story breathes out its last warm thread. The night settles now. The breath of the story softens. Everything grows quiet again. A faint echo of storm still hangs in the air, the kind that once pressed against the windows of Whitehall, carrying the scent of wet stone and the slow toll of distant bells. Even now, if you listen closely, you can almost hear the fabric of those rooms shifting, candles trembling, shadows leaning long across the floor, time breathing in its own heavy rhythm. But that century drifts away again, gentle as a door closing without sound. The past folds itself back into the dark, and we return to where we are, here, in the soft hush of your room, with nothing left to chase you except the quiet. So take a slow breath. Let the world loosen its hold for a moment. And if these whispered journeys keep you company at night, if they help you drift a little deeper or feel a little less alone, you're welcome to like or share or subscribe whenever it feels right for you. No rush, no pressure, just an open invitation to return whenever the night feels long. Goodbye, and we will meet again.